Adrienne Winl, a 32-year-old botanical illustrator from Ann Arbor, journeyed to the serene, snow-veiled town of Honor, Michigan in the third week of November 2009. Against a backdrop of heavy snowfall that muffled sounds and erased footprints, Adrienne was seeking not just artistic inspiration, but a genuine escape from distraction. She had carefully planned a 5-day creative retreat in a cabin, perched along the western edge of the Plat River, nestled amongst towering white pine and birch. The isolation of the cabin was unwavering. It was reachable only by a winding gravel drive that snaked through the forest, shrouding the property in solitude and quiet. The cabin itself belonged to Maren Vest, a retired orthopedic surgeon whose approach to renting sidestepped the convenience of any online listing. Vest operated with simplicity, handwritten postings at the Honor General Store, cash-only transactions, a signed waiver clarifying the lack of internet, plumbing beyond a well pump, and emergency services no closer than 20 minutes away, even in good weather. Adrienne's decision to retreat there was consistent with her need for undisturbed tranquility and provided a challenge to her creative process amid stark winter silence. On her arrival mid-November, Adrienne's every move was deliberated. Security footage from Beulah Fuel and Feed, a rural combination gas station and bait shop, captured her last confirmed public appearance. At approximately 3:47 p.m. on November 17th, she purchased firewood, 2 gallons of kerosene, a bag of apples, and a paperback mystery novel. Her attire, a gray wool peacoat and a cardinal embroidered cap, reflected both her practical sensibility and a hint of whimsy. She was seen exchanging a cheerful wave with cashier Darlene Kopp, her demeanor relaxed and content. Investigators would come to see this timestamp as one of the most crucial details in the early case files. Given both the clarity of her appearance and her apparent lack of distress, Maren Vest, expecting the return of the cabin key by Sunday, initially assumed that worsening snow had simply delayed Adrienne. The gravel drive had become treacherous. He reasoned she might wait for a break in the weather. By Monday, however, Adrienne's absence began to worry Vest. He drove as close to the cabin as conditions allowed, then trekked the final stretch on foot through deepening snow. Upon entry, Vest found a scene untouched by panic. A half-finished sketch lay open on the table. Her suitcase was neatly arranged, and all personal items were in their proper place. There was no sign of forced entry, nor any indication Adrienne had left abruptly of her own accord. Most disturbing, Adrienne herself was nowhere to be found. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, Maren Vest immediately notified the Benzie County Sheriff's Office, triggering the search and investigation that would ensnare the town and Adrienne's loved ones for years to come. When Maren Vest reported Adrienne's sudden disappearance to the Benzie County Sheriff's Office, the community response was immediate and substantial, setting in motion one of the largest coordinated search efforts in recent county history. A command center sprang up at the Honor Township Hall almost overnight. Local deputies, supported by Michigan State troopers, began combing the snowbound woods and riverbanks within hours. The support of the Traverse City K-9 Search and Rescue Unit brought highly trained dogs whose task was to scout for any scent trail before the endless Michigan winter could erase all traces. Members of the Honor Fire Department, and a growing roster of volunteers, some on horseback, to navigate the dense backcountry, braved plummeting temperatures and unpredictable weather. Helicopters, fitted with thermal imaging equipment, swept low over the Plat River and surrounding wetlands, their searchlights cutting sharp beams through the early winter dusk. Teams of divers, undeterred by thick ice crusting over Platte Lake's surface, scoured the inky dark water for any physical clue. Every passing day brought new obstacles. 8 inches of fresh snow from a blizzard on November 23rd, dangerously reduced visibility, and plunging wind chills. Still, the efforts remained relentless as authorities expanded the search radius from 3 to eventually over 6 square miles, encompassing dense forest, meandering creeks, and frozen marshlands. Inside the cabin, investigators meticulously cataloged Adrienne's belongings. They found her wallet, cell phone, and all personal items intact, eliminating the possibility of robbery. Outdoors, snowdrifts concealed evidence, but funded searchers probed for any indication that she might have wandered from the property or had been taken. In the absence of physical leads, every neighbor, Recent visitor to the Honor General Store and passing motorist was interviewed. The wider community was riveted. Search posters appeared in every business window, and daily updates headlined the local news. Adrienne's sister, Claire Winl, soon joined the search. She stood at emotional press conferences, beside a blown-up photograph of Adrienne's last smile, repeating the family's plea and announcing a $15,000 reward for any information. Tips occasionally arrived, sightings of a woman in a gray coat along a snow-packed trail, rumors of a stranger loitering near the river's bend, but all dissolved under scrutiny. Severe weather and relentless cold not only stifled progress but sapped the morale of everyone involved. As December deepened, with no discoveries and all plausible leads exhausted, authorities reluctantly suspended field operations. The final act of that winter's search was the posting of Adrienne's information to the state missing persons database, a somber admission that the boundaries of hope had once again receded. Yet the memory of the mobilized community, unified by both grief and perseverance, would outlast the snow and mark the first turning point in a mystery that, for the next decade, refused to rest. Almost 10 years after Adrienne Winl disappeared without a trace, the case remained dormant in public consciousness, sustained only by annual remembrances and the fading hope of her family. In February 2019, this long silence was finally shattered when brothers Lucas and Jeremy Toth, hiking in the sparse woods near Sleeping Bear Dunes, stumbled upon a partially buried canvas messenger bag. The bag's cracked leather strap and faded stitching spoke to its years exposed to harsh Michigan winters. Inside, the items were both familiar and haunting: waterlogged sketchbook pages, a rusted tin of charcoal pencils, and a library card laminated with Adrienne's name. The moment Lucas and Jeremy recognized the name, their sense of obligation was immediate. They marked the location and turned over the bag to local authorities. With the case reopened, Benzie County Sheriff's Office tasked Detective Warren Kulich with re-examining every piece of evidence and every lead. The sketchbook itself, though damaged, delivered critical insight. Forensic experts carefully dried and separated the pages, recovering 3 with legible content. One displayed a meticulous drawing of a winterberry branch, imbued with detail and quiet artistry. Another bore a dated note: "Someone knocked last night. Didn't answer, stood outside for a long time." The third, hastily scrawled, conveyed urgent worry: "He knows I'm alone here." These notes were immediately flagged by law enforcement as powerful signals. They revealed that Adrienne had sensed another presence, that she had experienced a knock on the cabin door, and that anxiety had clouded her solitude in the crucial final days. Word of the discovery breathed new life into investigative circles and the wider honor community. Old volunteers organized fresh efforts to search the woods, inspired by the thought that answers might still be within reach. Conversations at the general store turned again to remembered details, past sightings, and the bitter cold of November 2009. Families who had participated in the original search recounted the arduous days and nights, feeling both vindicated and deeply unsettled by the bag's emergence. Detective Kulich, methodical and thoughtful, began reconstructing the search radius. He overlaid maps with travel paths, recalibrated timelines, and analyzed the patterns revealed by the fresh clues. The new evidence dismantled previous assumptions, confirming that events had indeed unfolded outside the accepted lines, and the notes hinted at broader possibilities, revitalizing hope that the unsolved mystery could still reach resolution. Detective Warren Kulich, newly invigorated by the appearance of Adrienne Winl's messenger bag and the clues within, orchestrated a transformed search strategy that blended expertise from anthropology, forensic science, and criminal investigation. Michigan State University's Dr. Lillian Schott was brought on board, assembling a team of graduate students and local deputies to re-examine the woods and wetlands half a mile west of the original cabin and near the site of the bag's recovery. Detailed topographical studies combined with historical weather data mapped probable travel paths that reflected not only where Adrienne may have walked, but also where environmental changes might have deposited or exposed evidence. Extreme snow in 2009 and subsequent spring flooding had radically altered the terrain over the years, so the team focused meticulously on low-lying pockets, riverbanks, and clusters of hemlock and birch that might have concealed what others had missed. Canine expertise played a decisive role. Rue, a German Shepherd cadaver dog with a record of successful finds across the state, signaled at the edge of a collapsed riverbank shaded by tall hemlocks. There, Dr. Schott's team commenced careful excavation using archaeological methods. Their patience was soon rewarded. A swatch of gray wool fabric, its fibers remarkably intact, emerged from nearly a decade of burial, matching precisely the peacoat Adrienne had been seen wearing on surveillance footage. A cardinal emblazoned button, small yet vivid, materialized next, confirmed as identical to the one adorning her knit cap. Excavation uncovered bone fragments, sections of human radius and ulna buried more than 1.5 feet deep in the frozen ground. No animal marks were found on the bones, supporting the argument that cold and isolation had protected the evidence. DNA testing, first on trace samples from the messenger bag and then on the discovered bones, revealed a maternal link to Claire Winl, Adrienne's sister. Dental record checks made the identification conclusive. Days of meticulous mapping saw further findings: a broken wristwatch with its hands frozen at 11:43, and finally a plastic bag containing a rusted lockback knife. Cracked rubber handle and, on its hinge, microscopic traces of blood that matched Adrienne's profile. No speculation clouded the results. The facts stood alone. The remains belonged to Adrienne, and the evidence gave new clarity to the mystery that had haunted her family and Honor's close-knit community for a decade. A web of interviews, both long-standing and new, began to offer a vivid, if troubling, portrait of Adrienne Winl's final days in Honor. Marin Vest, the cabin's owner, was forthcoming about every detail of Adrienne's rental. He produced receipts, phone logs, and confirmed alibis for his time away, his presence at a medical conference out of state, backed up by hotel records and colleagues. Vest explained that his rental process was intentionally minimalist, but his protocols for cabin access and key handoff had worked reliably for years. He described the cabin's sturdy locks and clarified that Adrienne, as far as he knew, had been the only guest in that stretch. With no overlapping bookings or locally known visitors, Darlene Kopp, the last person besides Adrienne's family to see her alive, vividly recalled the artist's demeanor and shopping list. On surveillance footage, Darlene's interactions were warm and routine. Adrienne had chatted about looking forward to sketching in winter quiet, and nothing seemed amiss. Darlene mentioned that Travis Lorne, a local odd job worker, had been in the store at the same time. Lorne's distinctive behavior, his habit of smoking hand-rolled cigarettes, matched the fresh cigarette butts found near the woodpile outside Adrienne's cabin. This detail, combined with Darlene's observation of him loitering unusually long, pressed detectives to gather further background on Lorne. Local residents added context, speaking to Adrienne's daily routines. They described how she kept mostly to herself, followed the same paths to the river each morning, and always brought her sketchbook along. Her sister Claire shared a pivotal memory. Adrienne, calm but puzzled, had called from the cabin's landline to mention odd boot prints leading from the tree line to a rear window, a detail she hadn't shared with the cabin owner or police at the time. The interior of the cabin showed no evidence of struggle or panic. Her suitcase remained neatly packed, her car untouched, boots by the door, a mug slowly cooling on the counter. The growing accumulation of witness testimony and behavioral evidence reframed the missing person case. Instead of a lone disappearance, clues pointed to the possibility of another's presence, someone traversing the woods and perhaps watching from the shadows. These facts, never sensationalized or stretched beyond their documented bounds, slowly expanded the parameters of the investigation, laying the foundation for the crucial advances that were soon to follow. Detective Warren Coolidge's approach became even more comprehensive as he sought to narrow the field of persons of interest through methodical cross-referencing of every available record. He scanned volunteer registries from the original search, pulled property owner lists for parcels near the Plat River, and compiled lists of local residents with possible knowledge of the woods. His intent was not only to resolve inconsistencies, but to understand the social fabric that had quietly sewn Adrienne's movements and possible encounters into the background of Honor's daily life. Initial inquiries concentrated on Travis Lorne, whose proximity on the day of Adrienne's disappearance was supported by witness testimony and forensic links, specifically the roll-your-own cigarette butts at the cabin site. Lorne admitted to frequenting the area, and admitted after some resistance that he occasionally passed the cabin at night, blaming insomnia and an old habit of roaming the woods. Significantly, Lorne owned a Timber Ridge lockback knife, the same model as the one discovered near Adrienne's remains. However, after rigorous interviewing and the absence of any direct evidence, his knife clean, no fingerprints or DNA on the discovered weapon, Lorne's involvement seemed increasingly circumstantial. Detective Coolidge's systematic review shifted then to Owen Barrage, a sometimes volunteer and seasonal drifter with a patchy employment history, an expired restraining order, and long periods unaccounted for in the winter months. Barrage emerged as a critical figure when his name was identified on search sign-in sheets, specifically linked to regions within a mile of the recovery site. Tracing his movements further uncovered a series of makeshift campsites, the most significant of which contained a jar holding a waterlogged page from Adrienne's sketchbook and a button identical to those on her coat, quietly tying Barrage to the victim with physical artifacts. Deepening the inquiry, Coolidge and his team examined Barrage's journals. Phrases like, "watched her windows through falling snow," and "waited until the stillness paralleled evidence collected from the forest." Barrage initially denied involvement, but confronted with a fingerprint on the button and corroborative DNA evidence, a strand of hair matching Adrienne's profile found at his site, he began to unravel, offering cryptic but gradually fuller admissions about being present the night Adrienne disappeared. Each of these steps, careful record review, artifact recovery, and intensive interviews, brought the investigation squarely to Barrage's feet, turning years of uncertainty into something tangible and actionable. Through persistent, evidence-based detective work, the loose threads of the mystery were finally being woven into a story of accountability and, ultimately, justice. To Owen Barrage's confession came after hours of relentless, evidence-grounded interrogation led by Detective Coolidge and supported by a team versed in forensic interviewing procedures. Barrage's demeanor was flat, almost clinical, as he described the fateful night. He admitted to approaching Adrienne's cabin, initially with the intent only to watch, compelled by an inexplicable fixation on her isolation and artistic process. In his own words documented in case records, Barrage said, "I just wanted to see her. I don't know why. It felt important. But things got out of hand." He described tapping at her door and seeing her appear in the light. When Adrienne cracked the door, uncertain and wary, Barrage claimed his panic and lack of boundaries overwhelmed him. He forced his way in and a scuffle ensued. The impact of Adrienne falling against furniture caused a head injury, her scream muffled by the heavy snow and dense woods surrounding the cabin. Barrage's account revealed the emotional and psychological distance he maintained from the consequences of his actions. He explained how, after the altercation, he carried Adrienne, dazed or unconscious, into the woods, just needing to get away from what had happened. Barrage recounted watching her lose consciousness while cold consumed the night air, claiming that, overcome by panic, he could not bring himself to use the knife he had carried. Instead, he left her by the riverbank, later returning to bury key items, her sketchbook page, button, and a fragment of hair. Each element of his confession dovetailed with forensic findings: the recovered knife stained with blood matching Adrienne's DNA, the fingerprint on the button, and evidence linking the remains to the suspect's location. Legal proceedings moved swiftly in the months following Barrage's confession. He was charged with second-degree homicide, unlawful disposal of a body, and interference with a missing persons investigation. Barrage entered a guilty plea, sparing the victim's family and community the ordeal of a lengthy trial. The court transcript recorded Claire Win's statement: "We waited. We feared. We deserved the truth. Thank you." Sentencing was carried out. Barrage received a lengthy prison term, as investigators, community members, and Adrienne's family witnessed the end of an ordeal that had spanned a decade. For those involved, the moment was not triumphant but measured, a factual, inevitable closure to a dark period, resolved through unyielding investigative rigor and the slow piecing together of evidence that the snow had never truly buried. As news of the arrest and confession spread, the small town of Honor, Michigan, found itself gripped by a mixture of relief, sorrow, and introspection. Adrienne Winl's disappearance had long been a specter haunting local conversations, reopening wounds each time the snow fell and her name was mentioned in the community. With the case officially closed, Honor's residents convened not just for justice, but to support Adrienne's family, and to reckon collectively with the legacy of uncertainty and anguish that had shadowed their town. Claire Winl, Adrienne's sister, was at the forefront of shaping the community's response. She organized a thoughtful memorial service that drew attendees from across the region, artists who had worked with Adrienne, retired deputies who had combed the woods, volunteers who had stayed vigilant for nearly a decade. In a clearing not far from the riverbank where Adrienne's remains were recovered, a simple wooden cross was placed, surrounded by wild flowers collected from the woods and fields she had loved. Friends and strangers alike left painted stones, sketches, personal notes, and sculpted branches, honoring Adrienne's creativity and presence. During the ceremony, Claire spoke with dignity and clarity. She acknowledged the pain that would never fully subside, telling those gathered, "Closure is a word people use, but what we have is acknowledgement, answers that respect Adrienne, that heal our community, and remind us what is lost when truth is delayed." Her words resonated deeply, as many in attendance reflected on how shared action, persistent searching, and truthful storytelling could mend a community. The local sheriff expressed gratitude for the steadfastness of everyone involved and emphasized procedural lessons learned. The importance of detailed record-keeping, collaboration, and listening to even the smallest clues. In the weeks and months that followed, Anna recounted Adrienne's story through art, writing, and collective memory. The impact of her case echoed in new police protocols, enhanced search and rescue policies, and more attentive neighborly vigilance. For Claire and Adrienne's family, the resolution brought bittersweet solace. Uncertainty had finally yielded to truth, and the long winter of their waiting gave way to a spring of remembrance, resilience, and communal healing. In this way, Adrienne's story lived on, not as a mere statistic in a solved cold case, but as proof that persistence, empathy, and courage endure even at the edge of loss.